And who am I looking at?
Okay, so you're gonna look to us.
Oh, okay.
Okay, perfect. Let's take Okay, so there we go.
Thank you very much, Jim, for your patience, for your time, and for the opportunity to have this interview.
Oh.
We are journalists from Mexico. We are going to broadcast this interview for the public national television in Mexico and the Ibero-American channel for 22 countries
Great.
that speak Spanish. And we are so proud about Guillermo del Toro, and we are very happy that the AGO will present this exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to know, why did you decide to bring to Toronto this exhibition, and how it will be possible?
So the decision to bring it here was primarily our former director, Matthew Titlebaum, and he heard from the director of the Minneapolis Institute of Art that they were, about Bleak House, about this collection of Guillermo del Toro's, and that they wanted to bring a version of that to Minneapolis. And he said, well, you can only do that if we can be a partner. And he was just excited by that possibility. And so it was just inspiration. It wasn't like it wasn't a plan to, to do something in this vein. At the same time, we were and continue to be interested in broadening our reach in terms of visual culture. And we haven't quite figured out exactly what that means, but we've been doing a number of projects like the Bowie show a number of years ago, and then this show that certainly do that broaden how we think about visual culture, where visual culture is going, and how that might expand our audiences as well. And the second part of your question was again?
How it will be possible? You work with the people from LA, with the...
Right. LA came on board a little bit later. They were thinking along the same lines, and we didn't know that. Del Toro told us about that, and then we thought, well, if they're talking to him and we're now talking to him, let's all get together. And which is what we did, and that was very fortunate, because it really opening the exhibition in LA, as we did last summer of 2016, allowed us to to begin it in a venue that wasn't far from where Bleak House actually was, and when Del Toro was spending a lot more time in LA. So so that was good to to get things going there. But we decided from the beginning that each venue would be very different, so that if you traveled around, you would get a very different experience, even though the core objects might be the same and the core ideas might be the same, that we would each take our own approach to presenting it in many ways, including the fact that we worked with Del Toro to identify objects in each of our collections that we would weave into the exhibition. And they have been very different. I mean, they're the same and they're very different experiences. So, which I think is really exciting, because they've all been amazing. If I was just a visitor, I would like be blown away, I think. So
what will the people see when he comes to the exhibition?
They will see thousands of objects. When a typical show, a typical large exhibition, you might have 80 to 100, 120 objects. We have about 500 plus thousands of books and comic books and other things that kind of also enhance that. So it's it's a maximalist show. It's definitely not a minimalist show. People will see, they will see paintings, sculptures, prints, drawings, photographs. They'll see film clips. They'll see original comic book art. They'll see books. They'll see comics. They'll see, many, many things that inspire Del Toro and that tell the story. They'll also see these you know, rather large figures that you might, they're made of silicon mostly, and what you would, they're the kind of figures you would expect to find in a wax museum. And in fact, they're done by some amazing artists who've also worked for Tussauds and so forth. And they are of various monsters, Frankenstein, figures from films like Freaks, and also iconic authors like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft and so on. So they're the kind of the heroes in some ways of the story, and they're you know, they're kind of front and center. They're the kind of, I think, the thing that's most unusual in some ways about what, you know, what people will see.
And all the objects belongs to Guillermo del Toro.
Yes, there are things in the show that we've borrowed from, like costumes that we borrowed from Crimson Peak that belong to the effects studio that made them. They're you know, if they don't belong to Del Toro, they belong to us or local artists. And there's a handful of other things. You know, we borrowed some crows from the ROM, for example, and we borrowed, you know, some furniture from the Canadian Opera Company, and you know, we have borrowed a lot of things, but the key, you know, the key characters that you're going to see in the show, those are all from Del Toro's Bleak House.
Okay, perfect. So please tell us how the exhibition is going to be organized.
The exhibition is organized primarily by thematically, and the themes are kind of timeless literary themes. So, so we open with a section called Childhood and Innocence, and the show is kind of rooted in Victorian literary culture in a way. So these themes are things that you would find, you know, you would certainly find them going back to Shakespeare or before Shakespeare, but we're primarily drawing on that tradition of the 19th and early 20th century. So childhood and innocence, and that kind of segues to a section we have called Victoriana, and then you know, death and the afterlife, with the afterlife being, you know, a celebration in some ways of ghosts and vampires and the like, as opposed to more something from Del Toro's Catholic upbringing. There's an angel, but it's the angel of death from Hellboy 2, you know, and then we go from there to magic, alchemy, and the occult. And that's where H.P. Lovecraft is central, and then a section called Outsiders, which is really where we look at the role of monsters and the monstrous in culture, and then movies, comics, and popular culture, and that's a real explosion of, you know, of that part of Del Toro's brain. And then the final section is Frankenstein and horror, and Frankenstein is really the hero. It's, if you ask Del Toro what his favorite book is, he would say it's Frankenstein. And then the most important monster is the Frankenstein monster, and all the themes come together, all the themes of you know, our need to dominate, and who's the monster, right? And all those, all the great things that, you know, they kind of pulse through everything else we do, but they're most brilliantly articulated in Frankenstein.
Every exhibition is different, it's special, but did you remember something like that at the AGO? With this kind of objects,
No.
the monsters?
No. I mean, the closest you could compare it to is the Bowie show, which came to us from the Victoria and Albert Museum. The difference is we didn't, that was really a show that we took, we assembled and invited people in. But it had a lot of strange objects in it as well, that told the Bowie story. And it was a very, you know, it was very much a show about visual culture and Bowie as a kind of visual genius in a way, not just a musical genius, but it was different in that we were. It's just it was very much a show of artifacts in a way, whereas, you know, most of what we're borrowing from Del Toro is art in a way, and maybe it goes beyond what we would normally show, but it doesn't. But we might show it, and we have, we're showing a Piranesi piece, and he has Piranesi in his collection. It was just easier to show our own. He had, there's a lot of illustrators in his collection. We have similar works in our collection and stuff. So it's very, at the end of the day, that, but at the same time, there was nothing in the Bowie show in a way as kind of outrageous and fantastic as these monsters, he made an album called Scary Monsters, of course. But I think that's the closest, and then, I think back to other shows that have been, no, I think this is actually, there's no other way to put it. This is a kind of breakthrough moment, I think, yeah.
So what would you say is the purpose of this exhibition at that? Okay.
The purpose, well, I think the purpose is to broaden our understanding of visual culture, and to place what we think of as visual culture in a broader context. So this is a show. Del Toro is just as much rooted in literature as he is in film. He's rooted in visual art as much as he is in other forms of popular culture, high and low. So I think it's sort of embracing that, like really seeing what's going on in the culture and trying to bring a little bit, that here in a way that's different than what we would normally do with contemporary artists. That's part of it. I think it's also to connect to audiences that are also like deeply involved in visual culture and what they think of as visual art that we probably haven't been connecting to, and that's both the creative communities in film and television, internet, and gaming. Certainly, gaming is there's a huge number of people working in that field here. And just people who are interested in, and I think not seeing what they're interested in reflected at the AGO. So we're hoping to, I think we found a way to do that without, and it feels perfectly natural. Like once we really got into it, it doesn't feel like we're doing something that shouldn't happen at the AGO.
Did you have the opportunity to talk with Guillermo del Toro?
Oh, a lot, as much as I could, which is not enough sometimes, but it is. We have a really good rapport. I met him about 3 years ago. We went through his house with some people from Minneapolis as well, and then decided that we really needed to do something. And he's been here several times and been very. I was involved in the planning in LA, so and then continued to be, engaged with him whenever possible. And I've just had to work that way. It's like, oh, Guillermo can come here on Wednesday. Let's make sure we've got everything ready for him to see. He was just here last Tuesday, for example, but. It's a different kind of challenge because he's so busy and he's traveling around the world all the time, and so we have a kind of rapport. Like I email him a lot. I email. If I don't hear anything, everything's good. And then if I hear, but he checks it all. He's been very involved in the process in whatever way he's able to at that time.
And what does he say about this exhibition, for example? What his impression?
Oh, he's pretty. He's very. He really. He's torn. It's a private cabinet of curiosity, as they used to call these things, as these private collections. But he wanted to share it with the world, right? And he's done that in a number of ways. There was a book that came out before our book called Cabinet of Curiosities, which begins to share things, but although it really focuses on the notebooks, and we're really downplaying that. It's a whole other story. And then he had a kind of unveiling at the San Diego Comic-Con a number of years ago. But other than that, he's really only been able to bring a few people through the house at a time, because he always has to be there. So I think he likes that he's been able to make it much more public and make, he considers that house, not the house so much, but the collection, his most important artwork, more important than any of the films he's made. It gets to the heart of you know, how he thinks, how he's engaged with the world, and so it's important to him to communicate that, and he hasn't, you know, and this has been the best means for doing so. That being said, he's really trying to respect our autonomy as curators and professionals in the museum world. So it's always a discussion. And there's things I know that he's probably shaking his head, and he's just going to let go. And there's things that he decides he'll speak up about, and the things that he thinks will probably distort what he thinks his collection is about, But he's mostly been really just really encouraging, and it's always an idea. It's never like, don't go there. It's always for him like, yes, and never don't do that, or no, but. It's always yes, and. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. You met Guillermo del Toro. How can you describe him? For us, it's a proud for Mexico. He is by himself a giant, a monster. But what do you think is his contribution to the world through his films?
Yeah, well, we're going to see that more and more. I think The Shape of Water feels like it's going to be one of his most amazing films, and it's going to each time he makes a film, it redefines what we think of him. I think he's sort of in the middle of all these powerful literary and artistic genres, and he's very respectful of them, and then he breaks the rules, and by doing that he gives them new life. So with something like Crimson Peak, it's a Gothic romance, which is one of his favorite genres, and he always says, when you're reading Rebecca or Jane Eyre or whatever, they're almost like ghost stories, but the ghost never appears. And that's what makes them a Gothic romance as opposed to a ghost story. So he makes Crimson Peak. It's absolutely a Gothic romance, and then the ghost really appears, like there's really a ghost in it. And I think that by doing that, he's reinvigorated both the Gothic romance and the ghost story. I think with Pan's Labyrinth, I'll just talk about this one. Maybe people's favorite film of his, certainly like a masterpiece. He's brought us, he's given new life to the fairy tale. And that's something he says, which I think is true, that everything he's doing is about the fairy tale at the end of the day. And that's his deep obsession with art, especially in terms of 19th century book illustrators, 19th and 20th century book illustrators, but also in literature. But he's going back to fairy tales when they were made for adults, fairy tales when they were relentless, fairy tales when they were bloody and gory and unapologetic, and deeply disturbing. And Pan's Labyrinth is all of those things. At the same time, when I watch something like that, when I reread, Alice in Wonderland or something like that, it has a different meaning for me, a different life. So Del Toro has, for me, his films have given me a new understanding of Peter Pan, Pinocchio, Alice in Wonderland. And at the same time, he's pulled all this tradition of filmmaking, Spirit of the Beehive, Buñuel, Hitchcock, all this stuff, James Whale's Frankenstein. He's pulled all of this stuff into his films, sometimes in really explicit ways, sometimes in very subtle ways, and that's fantastic. It's not pastiche or anything like that. It's just like someone who is deeply enthusiastic, literate, just deeply engaged in the tradition of film, and doing his own thing with it. And sometimes not knowing, like he'll say Hitchcock is one of his favorite filmmakers, but he has no idea how he's actually influencing his films. It's just in the DNA now, you know. So he's, I think he's in the process of. He's a great filmmaker, and he's in the process of becoming like one of the giants, you know.
Okay, Guillermo del Toro obviously is Mexican. He's a filmmaker who is known all over the world, but he has a special relationship with Toronto.
Sure.
A kind of romance.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a nationalist, so I don't have to say, no, he's Canadian. Even though he's Mexican, American, Canadian, Spanish, New Zealand. I think he's spent time in all of those places. Yeah, I think the Toronto thing, there's just a number of layers to it. I think, you know, it's just Toronto's a great place to make films. And not simply because of the, you know, tax situation, not simply because of the dollar. Those things are true. You have to be savvy, you have to be an entrepreneur, right? But because there's so much talent here, and the kind of talent that he's looking for, the kind of crews, you know, when he finds like a makeup person, like that really matters. Makeup, he starts his career in makeup and effects, so he knows the importance of those things, and he works. You know, he's more interested in some ways in those than he can always bring in a great actor or one of his favorite, you know, Doug Jones and Ron Perlman, the people that he really wants to work with or shoot them in a studio somewhere. But it's the makeup, effects, lighting, set. You know, where Crimson Peak. You know, they found a sound stage to build that entire set, like, and it's, you know, so the actors loved working on that because they didn't have to fake anything. It was like they were in that house, you know. You can do that in Toronto and Hamilton and the neighboring cities. So he really likes that. But in the process of doing that, I think his family also really came to like it here as a, you know, it's like his kids go to school here, and one of them's not in Toronto, but close by. If you go to an antiquarian bookstore in Toronto, they know him. If you go to a comic store, they know him. This is a guy, he doesn't have a whole lot of time. He doesn't like hang around with a big entourage at a nightclub or anything like that. So when he has a little bit of downtime, you'll find him in a bookstore, a comic store, and those guys know him. Otherwise, people don't really see him. You know what I mean? He's not like a public presence the same way because he's working all the time. You know, he's just he's in the middle of this incredible creative frenzy right now. So, yeah. So I think he's found it a great place to be. But you know, he's also in Paris. He's also in L.A. He's also back in Guadalajara or wherever. Like he has to be different places. He's very much a global citizen.
Okay. Do you want to add something?
I
mean, there's so much to say.
There will be a special activities that people will meet Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, so the one thing for sure is on a couple of days before the show opens, on January 27th, there'll be a book signing. It's a long book signing.
September.
That's my brain. Yeah.
Okay, let's go again.
Let's go again. It's going to be.
Okay.
All right. Good catch. All right. So on September 27th, we're going to have a book signing. It'll be like a long book signing. It'll start at 4 in the afternoon. Although we're telling people they can line up for it as early as 9 in the morning because we've seen what happens in other cities. And Del Toro is going to sign books. He's going to sign the books that we made originally for LA and that we have here. Many other books, though, that have been made on his films. Whatever, you know, our store is going to have an incredible selection of books, Blu-rays, T-shirts, magnets, all kinds of things that people can buy and have Del Toro sign. And he's really, really generous that way. So we're really looking forward to that. And we saw in the previous cities that, you know, he would introduce films and do this and do that, but the most popular thing was this book signing. And, you know, fandom really loves him, and he's a fan, right? So he really relates to the fan crowd in a big way. So we thought that was important to do. Other than that, he's going to make some appearances, and we just don't know what yet. So they're going to happen, like, you know, because of his schedule, we can't fix those months in advance. But for example, in Minneapolis and LA, he did these sort of pop-up tours, and it was just like that day. It's like, hey, Del Toro's doing a tour at 6 o'clock today in the show. So we, you know, I'm not positive what those things are going to be, but we're going to, you know, figure out what opportunities there are to do more for the public. But September 27th, 4 till 9, book signing. That's going to be a special event. You know, typically in a book signing, we have an hour is what we would do. We would ask an author to do. So he's giving us a lot of time, because we know. We tried to make it. I remember in LA, we tried to make it really like an hour and a half or something like that. And he said, "Yeah, that's it. That's all I want to do." And he went in, like he went in and introduced a film in the middle, and came out and then continued signing for 3 hours. Because he didn't want to turn anyone away.
How many people do you expect that come this day?
To the signing?
To the signing.
I mean, you know, could be thousands. You know, I don't know. Hard to say.
And for the whole exhibition from September until.
You know, we have targets, and we don't make them public because they're not things that we, you know, we often exceed them. We make them public after. We say this is what our, you know. So for example, Georgia O'Keeffe, I think our target was something like 150. I don't know. Samantha could probably correct me over there. You know, we exceeded it by whatever our target was by 30,000 people or something like that. But you know, every show is different, and we don't usually have a precedent. So we have we have some ideas of what would work. We also have a capacity, right? Because of the show, we can only let so many people in at a time for security and conservation reasons. So we kind of know, you know, if we max out on the weekends and so on, and the Wednesday and Friday night, you know, like there's only so many people. But we expect it to be extremely popular with every segment, like with our members, with school groups, with these fans who aren't here all the time but might become, you know, here, and with people who are just, you know, I mean, looking for something different, you know.
Okay, perfect.
Finally, how can you describe with 3 words the upcoming exhibition of Guillermo del Toro?
Well, I could say Guillermo's monster home. That's something. He's got a really big house in the suburbs. You know, I think it's Guillermo art monsters, or Guillermo monsters and art, right? In that, in some ways, it's a traditional show. You know, walls filled with beautiful paintings and sculptures and drawings and so on. So in some ways, it's very, you know. On the other hand, it's all about Frankenstein, right? And it's all about the Pale Man, and it's all about, you know. What I wouldn't do is describe it. I would say this: if anyone's coming to learn about the making of Del Toro's films, they won't be disappointed. But it's not the point of the show. It's not how we got to that, right? It's not like previous shows that might have toured around, say on Tim Burton or Stanley Kubrick, which have been brilliant. This is really about a collection that gets you inside his mind. right? Which then tells you something about his filmmaking, and then allows you to see, you know, how thoughtful and brilliant the creation of some of these monsters, like the Faun and the Pale Man, and then Santi's ghost, and so on. How much they're kind of rooted in hundreds of years of literature and art. That comes out in the show, I think. And then really at the end of the day, so why monsters? Like that's really the, you know, and I think that's the question we answer most profoundly in the show, which is that monsters represent for Del Toro the idea that maybe the unusual, maybe the abnormal, maybe the you know, maybe the outsider is more has more humanity, is more interesting, is maybe worth more consideration. In the cabinet of curiosities, you know, that's typically what you found, is people had these kind of weird, strange, bizarre collections, but they were often about, you know, collecting something that maybe represented you know, the story, the thread that we had buried somehow in our attempt to catalog and categorize the normal. So. I haven't quite, but.
So, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you
for your time.
Thanks. Thank you. You're first. So you know, this is all unpolished.
Thank you so much.
Was I supposed to do that in Spanish?
Yeah, can we repeat it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are excited.
Yeah,
To see the exhibition.
it's gonna be really good.
And Guillermo del Toro maybe have the opportunity or the chance to interview him.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's
He also will be at the shoot.
yeah. You know what? What's gonna happen? So he's gonna be. He'll be at TIFF, presented in The Shape of Water, and then I don't know. It's kind of an interesting time now. That's that film. Huge, in a way. I mean, as huge as a film about a swamp monster will be, but it will be big, I think. So he's going to be doing that, and then he had decided not to introduce the films. Like, we're showing films here, and so he's showing films there. The ones they're showing, he was supposed to be introducing, and he decided he couldn't do that, so he was going to make these video introductions, and then do these workshops down there later in January when the show's open. Maybe that's where my mind is. But now I don't know exactly. I think that his distributors and like all the people behind him are like probably encouraging him to spend more time talking to the public. Like, it'll be interesting, something that we'll have to talk about, because I think he's getting pressure to spend more time, you know, which he wasn't really planning to do. He was planning to just show the film at festivals, let it come out in December, and just focus on the next film in this period. But it's clear that something's happening to his career. So he may be more public than he planned to be. He's very generous. He's very generous media with fans and all that. He just only has so much time. So he's also kind of ruthless about that. So.
Do you think it's possible we get a media accreditation for that signature, that sign that he's gonna have to see the fans, maybe have some shots?
Yeah, you can email us. You can email Carly.
Okay.
To talk about it. We aren't planning to do any interviews that day, just because he's going to be so busy with the signing.
Yeah.
But we're planning on inviting media if they they want to shoot the signing. We just can't offer interviews.
No, because it's our one offering to the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
But it would be also interesting to show
Yeah.
like the people
Yeah,
who wants to meet
totally.
him and how open he
That's
is. Like even
super
though he's a giant, he's like so humble and
Oh yeah, it's very.
Yeah, that's totally. Email Carly, and we can definitely talk about that. That's something that we're happy to like facilitate.
okay, perfect.
So that's a good way to that he is what you just said.
Yeah.
Like he's a giant and he's very humble.
Yeah.
He's very he's actually low key. This is really shocked because not many people of his stature behave that way. So.
I'm so sorry. We just have to clear out of the space.
Okay.